Welcome to the Man Amongst Men podcast. Live a life of intentionality, adventure, and brotherhood. Take the inner journey and live out over your edge constantly. Here are your hosts, Dominic and Bryan.
In case you've been asleep at the wheel, you may not know that one of the key characteristics of being a man amongst men is honoring women. And guys, one of the best ways that you can honor women is by actively expanding your perspective and deepening your understanding of the issues that are most important to women. Learning how they want to be communicated with and how that differs from the way that we want to be communicated with. How to constantly refine your listening so you can hear her on a level that she wants to be heard. Learning to become so trustworthy that you can evoke her desires, her dreams, and insecurities in a way where she can feel totally supported by you. And guys, when you can learn these skills specific to the women that are most important in your life, you become irresistible. You become magnetic. It allows you to connect more freely and deeply with the women that are most important to you in your life, but also to attract the women that you want into your life. These skills will help you to navigate those emotionally challenging situations that could feel heavy or draining. Rather, these are now opportunities for you to connect and support a woman where you can feel like a hero for being there in a way that you weren't before. So Bryan and I, we see our role in supporting you on this journey as giving you regular exposure to the experts who work with women, who can teach us how to do these very things. And so that's why we're bringing you a very special guest today, a friend of mine who's a wonderful mentor and coach to women, Blaire Lindsay. Blaire tends to work with two different types of women. So fellas, if either one of these women describe the women in your life, you're going to want to listen in. Number one, she works with the woman who's chronically in the state of busyness, doing, on her way to burnout, if not burnt out already, and needs to find a better way. And then the second type of woman who's just stuck, paralyzed in the place that she is. She doesn't have a direction, and she needs to know what that next step forward is. So Blaire is coming on the show today to really go through a number of things that you guys have asked us specifically about, like when the woman in my life brings me a problem, how do I know when she wants me to solve it versus just listen? Because I've gotten in trouble with that in the past. She teaches us how to cultivate our deep listening skills to listen in a way that she wants. She gives us some insight on how a woman's arousal trajectory is very different than a man's and how to sync up with that so she can feel warm and supported and hot for you. She goes into what happens to a woman potentially after she gives childbirth. For many of you guys out here who have asked, what happened to my wife? Blaire's got answers for you. And then how to ask for sex, how to ask for your desires in a non-needy, non-entitled way that will make her feel inclined to want to meet you where you're at. Enjoy the episode, fellas. Blaire, this has been a long time coming. Welcome to the show.
Hey, Dom. Feels so good to be here talking with you today.
So one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on the show is because so many of our greatest insights have come from going directly to the source, right? Talking to women, having a beginner's mind, shutting our mouths and just listening. And you are a leader of women, a guide to women. And I think it would be a helpful place to start if you could share with us who are the kinds of women that come to you and what do they come to you for?
Generally speaking, the women that I work with fall into two different camps. So one camp is the kind of woman who she's stuck in doing mode. She's high achieving. She's just in that continuous state of stress and doing. And it is impacting her relationships, her ability to have intimacy, her health. So that's one camp. The other camp would be, and this is interesting because it's kind of a new type of woman that's just coming to me really naturally. This kind of woman is also sees the only way to get somewhere as this doing mode, and she's not into it. And so she's kind of stuck in freeze mode. She's like, I don't really like the options available to me. I don't want to sacrifice my health. I don't want to sacrifice my relationships, but how do I go do these big things that I want to do in the world? The solution for both, or how I approach both, is exactly the same. In fact, it's really by examining and redefining what feminine power is, and really using pleasure as a way to come into that, and using body wisdom as a way to come into that.
Yeah, would love to dive deeper into that. So the two categories of women, the first one, the doing woman, the high achieving woman, always in motion, juggling a million things. I think I'm pretty clear on what that looks like. What does it look like when a woman is in freeze mode?
Well, I can really relate to it, actually, because I feel like that is actually more my journey than the former. Maybe already feeling in some ways connected to feminine power, like someone who's, I'll say, stereotypically yin, let's say.
And what is that?
Go with the flow, easygoing, agreeable, attuned to the needs of others, more sensitive, more empathic. And in my life, especially in the spiritual communities that I lived and ran in for a long time, this was really celebrated. It's like, oh, that's so great. You're so nice and you're so agreeable. But I wasn't getting to where I wanted to go in my life, and I didn't feel expressed. I didn't feel like all of me was being brought to the table. So similarly, this woman that's her default, is this yin passivity, receptivity, go with the flow. She's highly sensitive, so she doesn't want to step on anybody's toes, but she has something big to share with the world. She has gifts and talents that the world needs, and she needs to share.
Yeah, and fellas, as you're listening to this, it's going to be helpful to identify the women in your life that you can see embodying those traits and characteristics, whether it's the woman who's freezing or the woman who's in the chronic doing mode.
Yeah.
And Blaire, I know a part of your history was there was a time where you were a party girl, you were a bartender, and you were on a path to becoming a lawyer, right? So it sounds like parts of your journey were, I'm doing what I think I'm supposed to be doing, and that probably left you in a place of seeking, right?
Oh, absolutely. Taking a model, taking a framework, and just superimposing it on my life, even though it didn't feel right.
Yeah. Was there something that happened, like a moment that made you wake up, or was there an intervention with someone that woke you up?
Yeah, definitely. And I'm just going to be totally candid about it, because that's my style. Is I was on this path of working 12 to 18 hours a day, studying, going to school, juggling so many things. And I had a big wake-up call when I started to remember childhood sexual trauma. And it started to come on in very non-linear ways. It was more like a feeling in my body. It was weird memories, but it was like, okay, something happened. I know it's having an effect on my life in ways that I probably don't even understand right now. And to heal that was a huge driving force of like, okay, I can't do just to avoid anymore. I can't avoid this feeling by achievement or by more clothes or more money. Like, I have to deal with this. And it felt very pressing at that time.
Unignorable.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I'm just curious, when this awakening was happening, were you completely unaware of the childhood trauma up until that point? Or was there some sort of awareness that something had happened, but like you'd buried it, you'd set it aside and made yourself busy so that you didn't have to deal with it?
There was no conscious awareness of it.
At all?
There was no awareness of it at all. And what triggered the memory was the abuser, the perpetrator, whatever you want to call him, he died. And that kind of triggered this emotional response that was really confusing, which then led to this unfolding.
Wow. That's super powerful. I'm just curious about the women who come to you. Do you see some patterns with they're also now starting to consider certain things that are bubbling up that are unignorable? I imagine some of that would be sexual trauma and abuse, but are there other things that start to come up and and they're like, I can't ignore this feeling anymore, and that's why they're coming to you?
Oh, definitely.
Like, what are some of those other things?
I think a big one is a sense of unworthiness, a sense of not deserving, whether that's what that woman has or what she really wants, a gnawing sense of just not being worthy. And unworthiness can actually be a great motivator. Then I'm just going to get the thing and do the thing and get the degree. It often happens that when that mountaintop, when they get to that peak and then they realize, oh, it's still there, then some kind of crisis, or again, that gnawing ache of like, okay, it's something deeper.
It's amazing how so many different people can react very differently to that feeling of unworthiness. So for some people, it's an extraordinary motivator. I see this all the time in the high-performing men and high-performing women that I coach. It's like, that's exactly what gets them to the top of the mountain. And then they say, oh, wow, this didn't feel as good as I thought it would. It can send some people into a tailspin, right? Just starting things, not finishing them, freezing, directionless, and that compounds upon itself. Blaire, thank you for sharing just a little bit of your story. I think I would like to get into it more deeply as we progress in the conversation. And I know it's just like very intimate information, which now you use as a healing mechanism for the women who come to you, which is awesome. But maybe if you can start with helping some of our men, what are some of the non-obvious things that you see in the women that come to you that men need to know? Men have blind spots. You are exposing all of them, many of them, as you're working with these women who are coming to you. What are some of the things that you've been able to unearth that like our guys need to know about?
I would have to say, and maybe this is obvious, I don't know, maybe it's not super subtle, but I feel that women really want to be listened to, and cultivating that skill of just listening. So not trying to fix, because this is the great skill of men. Like, this is why I love men, is that you are in many ways hardwired to look for what is fixable, how to be more efficient, this sort of thing. But cultivating that skill of just deeply listening to a woman and not deflecting the sometimes uncomfortable emotions that it can bring up by trying to fix or by trying to explain or by trying to rationalize. Just listening deeply is a real gift to a woman.
Yeah, let's go deeper on that one, because this is for sure an area where some of the guys that come to us struggle. It's like, how do I know when she's bringing me a problem that she wants me to fix? How do I know when it's just like she just wants me to listen to her? And then what the hell is my role once I'm just listening, right? I feel like I'm not doing something. I'm just sitting there nodding my head. Like, you know what I mean? Help us with that one.
Yeah, absolutely. My husband and I have an amazing strategy for this. After a lot of, that's not what I want, you're not listening to me, don't try to fix me, it's, hey babe, do you need empathy or do you need strategy right now?
Oh, very interesting. So like he'll start that with the pick a lane, A or B.
Yeah, it'll be like, I'm upset about something didn't go well. Okay, do you need empathy or strategy? And sometimes I do need strategy. And then I'm so glad that he asked. And sometimes I really just need him to, listen.
Were you going to say shut up? I think that word was about to leave your mouth and then you caught it. You could definitely say shut up.
Yeah, just be with it and be with me in that. And I acknowledge that that's actually really difficult for men. It's not an easy place to be. It is in many ways more comfortable to look for the solution. And that unknowingness, that chaos can be incredibly uncomfortable. So practicing being in that space, and to use the really trite analogy of just practicing that muscle or building that muscle is a really good skill.
No doubt. I finished reading The Female Brain, which is a book by Dr. Luann. I don't know how I say her last name, Brizendine or Brizendine, something like that. She's also written The Male Brain, And she talks about how in the male brain, when someone has an emotional reaction, it could be a woman, it could be anyone, it actually causes the male brain like pain in a very different way than women, right? So a woman's brain, like whatever it is, like the empathy trigger, the empathy circuits, the mirror neurons start to fire up, and it triggers a very different reaction than most men who really feel the pain, which is what triggers this need to fix. Yeah. And what I love about what you're saying, Blaire, is sitting in that discomfort is very uncomfortable for a guy. But what that does when we react to that discomfort, it doesn't allow us to refine our depth of awareness. Correct me if I'm wrong, but in my experience and the training I've got, women find it irresistible when a man can go really deep with a woman and hold her emotional reactions, hold her emotional expressions, the moment by moment changing, like the tornado, it could be a tornado of emotion, and still stand there strong and sturdy and be like, baby, I got you. What else is in there? And just containing it, allowing her to express that without needing to solve and fix. I know that for me, over the course of my life, I was a big fixer. I got confused and overwhelmed in situations where there'd be an emotional reaction, especially if it was something that I had caused, and I would want it to go away. But what you're saying is like one of the deepest ways that a man can be there for the woman in his life is by just like allowing, but also like asking that question of what is it you need now, which could also, it sounds like, even provide you some much needed direction around what is it that I need? Is it empathy or is it strategy?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And in a moment of confusion or chaos, that feels like a life raft. Do you need empathy? Do you need strategy? Some direction there, as you say.
I love that, a life raft. Okay. What else? What's another non-obvious thing that a guy needs to know about some of these maybe challenges that women are bringing to you?
Well, one maybe non-obvious thing, and I don't know, maybe you talk about this. I know you talk about pornography a lot or some in your work. But one thing that I would really love men to get is the total beauty of slowing down during sex. Because, and maybe you've talked about this, but the warm-up time for men and women is so different. The male arousal trajectory is, let's say, at minimum 5 minutes, maybe less.
I would cut that down to 5 to 10 seconds.
Okay.
Depending on the moment.
Okay. Thank you. For a woman, her female arousal trajectory can take up to 40 minutes. And it's a lot more complicated in some ways. Slowing down and taking your time when we talk about sexual trauma, when we talk about these things and difficulties that women are experiencing right now, like with all the Me Too information, with all of these triggers that are coming up in sexuality, a wonderful way to deal with that is just by slowing down and taking your time and checking in. Like, does this feel good? Do you like this? Having an open kind of dialogue around it and giving a woman space to get ready, to warm up, to feel like she can connect with what she wants and talk about what she wants. That's also such a gift to a woman.
The space to actually communicate what she wants.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Let's do a little deeper dive on a few of these things you just shared. So, for example, you said woman's arousal trajectory could take as long as 40 minutes, right? Mm-hmm. So are there certain stages? When you talk about the trajectory, is there like a stage that she goes through at first and then another stage that, creates the escalation so that there's some sort of awareness around, okay, like when she's fully ready to go, I know we've moved through these stages and I know the things that I need to do to keep the movement going, to keep the progress going?
Right. That's a great question. I've never actually thought about it in terms of stages, but you could really break it down like that. I mean, first stage is really, really basic. Is she warm? So a woman needs to be warm, body temperature wise. Coldness is in general going to cause a woman's body to just be contracted. So like turn the fan off, turn the AC down, let her literally get physically warm. That's something that might sound so simple, but it's really effective. So physical warmth, comfort, is there a candle lit? Is there music playing? What's the ambiance like that's also going to allow a kind of nervous system response that will lead to sexual arousal? Because if the nervous system is activated, there's contraction, there's stress, it's going to take longer. There's just contraction there.
Yeah, one of the things that we've talked about, we had Lauren Baptiste, who is a woman who came and spoke at our Discerning Dick event, and she talked a lot about stress hormones. And she said, listen, the stress hormones in your partner directly affect her ability to activate her sex hormones. So if you are down with having more intimacy with your partner, you need to become a magician, creating environments where she experiences less stress or she can de-stress. So if you're talking about like the women who are in this chronic state of doing, I'm a working mother, I'm now racing home, I've got a million things to do, and then all of a sudden, like, you want to pounce on me. It's like, right? And she's like juggling 100 balls that from the day. It's like, how do you create that stop? Right? Like, how do you create like a natural end for that part of her day and like welcome her, invite her in to this like new sultry space, this new space where she can feel warm, like you're caring for her.
Yeah.
And I'm curious because for men, one of the things that they bring to me is I'm tired too, and like the one place I feel like I shouldn't have to work. And this is something we're overcoming with some, with our coaching is I feel like I shouldn't have to work in the bedroom, and like 40 minutes of warm up time. That sounds like just a long thing, and creating the candles and the temperature, like that's a lot of variables. It's like, you know what I mean? So like, what would you say to that guy?
Well, I do speak to that guy because that guy is my husband.
Nice.
And this is an ongoing conversation that we have to dissect it a little bit. First of all, it's like, men, it's not only your responsibility to make sure that your woman is ready to go. That's not just on your shoulders. So I'm not saying like create this love cove and light the candles or whatever. That's definitely generous. If you're feeling generous, you want to give a beautiful gift to your partner. Yes, it's a great idea. But it also is a woman's responsibility to manage her own stress hormones. So to take a hard stop at the end of the day, okay, I'm done. Phone's off. What's something that's going to bring me more into my body, more into my senses, more into myself, rather than the tape player of things I have to do. So, and these are just examples, but actually cooking is a great way to make that transition, right? Like getting into the feel and the flow and tasting things. That's a great way. Just having a bit of time to recharge, to rest, to lie down. Yeah, so that it also is the woman's responsibility. That's one thing that I wanted to say about that.
I imagine you're making a lot of male fans right now who are like, where do I send my wife? Is it BlaireLindsay.com? Yeah. Okay.
Well, and for the women listening, like it's empowering to do that also. Yeah. You're nourishing yourself. It's not like you're doing it just to have sex. You're doing it to recharge your nervous system and to feel better in your body. But then the other thing I wanted to say too, and this has been part of the conversation with my husband and I, there was resistance to him slowing down because he didn't have a model of what that looked like. Porn doesn't give a model of that. He had this idea of like, no, to perform, I do X, Y, and Z, and it looks like this and it feels like this. And then I'm asking to do something different. And that again was like this discomfort of, well, I don't know what to do. I don't know what that would look like. And I feel like we're still figuring it out. But one thing that was really so helpful was his willingness to just, okay, this is uncomfortable, but I love you. And then what it also brought up for him, and again, just being totally candid, it brought up an opportunity for him to work on his own sexuality and do some healing around these places where he feels uncomfortable and might not know why.
Yeah.
And to be honest, I think the sexual trauma statistics or sexual abuse statistics, they're staggering. And I actually think they're lowballed in some way. I think so many of us have undigested experience around sexuality, whether that is outright abuse, whether that's just an experience where it's like, did I do something bad there? Was I in the wrong? Did I cross a line? Was a line crossed for me and I didn't say anything? Like, we're all dealing with these undigested experiences. So in this instance of kind of redefining what sex can be, I'm really grateful to my husband for looking at that stuff in his life. And that's really what it brought up for him, which was also why it was so fucking difficult.
Sure. I love that term, undigested sexual experiences. And for me, what came up was my guilt and shame, the religious overtones of my youth, and also what I learned in my household, where I was just uncomfortable for those things. And I've used this example before, but like being an 8-year-old kid watching a movie with my parents on a Friday night, which was simultaneously one of the most exciting nights that we would spend together, but also scary because if like a woman's shirt came off, my parents would lunge across the couch and be like, no, and cover my eyes.
Yeah.
And then in the room would be just like this tense, angry place for the next like 10 minutes. And I was like, I wanted to see that. And at the same time, it's like there's this miserable feeling in the room while I'm grappling with this desire. Yeah. And I brought that unconsciously into a lot of my interactions with women later on. It always felt like, here's this amazing thing that's happening right now with this girl or woman. And I also felt guilty always because of like that conditioning. And when you're talking about the slowness, one of our friends, Lila, who runs Horizontal with Lila podcast, one of the things that she said is, as coaching, she goes, go slower than slow and then slower than that. To really slow things down. And like, I've loved that, but I can also understand like what would happen with men who have operated at a certain speed all their life. When you turn on porn, you're in it. It's like, you hit the play button and there's penetration happening already. Like there is no wind up time. And so for a guy who's attempting to slow it down, there could be a lot of fear of, like you mentioned, some of these, not knowing what to do. But what happens if like the slowing down, I lose my arousal? And if I lose my arousal and then I lose my erection, then I'm going to feel like less than a man. And maybe my partner has shamed me before in the past, or she's been frustrated or disappointed in the past, and I don't have her support. There's a lot of stuff that could go on here. I appreciate you saying the first step is the willingness, right? The willingness to go there. Has most of his education process come from you directly? Or are there places that like he can go to learn about that, like online resources or books? I have one in mind. I'm just curious, like, is there any place that he's gone or you've pointed him?
Yeah, there's a pretty firm rule in our house that we never give unsolicited advice. And I actually don't want to be that person for him, at least explicitly. It's like, I think when there's that closeness in relationship, things can fall on deaf ears because of the minefield or trigger that is relationship. What my husband has found really helpful is a type of therapy that I also, I'm training in currently and also always receiving. It's called somatic experiencing.
Yeah. So for people who don't know what somatic means, what is it?
Somatic is anything related to the body. And basically it's a body-based trauma therapy modality, you could say. And despite being really resistant to it, my husband started doing it with a person that he really respects and appreciates, and he loves it.
So he's responding.
It's simple, it's easy, yet he's responding so well. For example, if you hear us talking about undigested experiences, this modality is a great way to do that. and do it through the body.
What's interesting is I'm thinking about the version of me from maybe 5 years ago, 10 years ago, and hearing the word trauma as kind of like a precursor to somatic experiencing, I would have swept it away because it's like, oh, I didn't have trauma. And like, I don't actually label my experiences as traumatic. It's just from my own personal belief system. I had stigmas I needed to overcome, stories that I needed to change. How do you get a person who doesn't feel like, nah, it's not trauma. I just got like a thing or two that I need to work on to move towards. Maybe even like using some of the women in your group as an example who are like, yeah, I haven't been sexually abused, right? Like I haven't had these things that everyone else is saying about, and I feel kind of guilty because I'm in this place of blah, but I haven't had these horrible things happen to me. Like, how do you get that person to say, yeah, but there's still value in this for you?
Yeah, there is a lot of stigma around that word trauma, and it can have can create a strong reaction. Perhaps a better way to look at it is just to call it undigested experience, because that's essentially that's my personal take on trauma. And this is a definition that Peter Levine, who's kind of the godfather of this work, maybe just the straight up father, but he talks about anything that happens too fast, too much, too fast, too soon.
Yeah.
Right? Something that just happened. We didn't have the adequate time and space to process it in our system. And so it's left a kind of residue. And you're calling it stigma, bias. It sounds like there's emotional charge there. Some might consider it trauma, and it may be more severe, but it doesn't have to be severe.
Yeah. Okay. When you put it through the lens of too much, too fast, too soon, I can completely relate to that. So I think about, and I've shared about this on my podcast before, around when I first discovered masturbation at the age of 13, something like that. It was at a point in time where like I was really insecure, sensitive. I had just a tornado of emotions inside of me. I didn't know how to deal with it. Boom. All of a sudden I have this feeling that was like sitting on a pile of heroin that was free. Yeah. I could pull on a crank and get it at any time. For a few years, it was like 3 to 5 times a day, relentlessly. Too much, too fast, too soon. That became kind of like my foundation for a lifetime of how I dealt with emotions. I think about other men who I've spoken with where they dove into porn that way. Too much, too fast, too soon. Like just things that they, as a 12-year-old, how do you process a gangbang? Like as a 12-year-old, right? And other men still who, I'm thinking of someone in particular where he was, 15 and ended up having, sleeping with a much older woman, maybe 35, so 20 years, something like that, his senior, where on some level he holds that as a source of pride, right? Because as young guys, like all you want is like, as soon as you learn or is not even learning how your dick works, but as soon as like your dick starts activating, the thing that you want is sex. And to get it early like that, there's almost this like, I'm a man. Like I feel proud about that. And what I look at it now is that's too much, too fast, too soon.
Yeah.
And that's the undigested experiences you're talking about, that once it's put through that lens, now there are things that are conditioned into your body.
Exactly. And that's a great word is it's a condition. A great metaphor is to think of it as like a record player, right? So when we have an experience that is overwhelming, then an etch on that record player, it's just like a big line or mark. And then every time that record player comes back to that same spot, it skips.
Yeah.
And it's just the same conditioning, the same pattern, the same emotion. And it starts to dictate our lives or influence our lives in ways that we aren't always conscious of.
And then that stuff shows up in your relationships. That skipping record shows up in how you react when your partner turns you down, or your partner wants to slow down, or she rejects your advances, or you know what I mean? Like all of these things. Okay. Yeah. Do you work with women, a fair number of women who have just recently given birth?
That's also becoming more of a theme. The theme right now is women who had an incredibly empowering experience during birth, or kind of touched into a kind of air quotes, feminine power that they'd never experienced before. And then they come to me and they're like, wow, I felt amazing and fucking powerful. And I want to connect to that.
Yeah. Awesome. Mm-hmm. She's changing, right? I mean, dramatically. And the guys who come to us are like, what happened to my wife? Like, what happened to her? She's so different now. And those emotional changes and the hormonal changes that Dr. Llewellyn Brizendine talks quite a bit about in the female brain, the mommy brain, most guys aren't prepared for the fact that they could be with an entirely different woman during the pregnancy, after the pregnancy. And I'm just curious to know if, again, things that men need to know that often aren't told, these women who are coming to you, what are you seeing? This is what you need to know about where she may be at.
So first of all, birth, if within the right context and right environment, can be a rebirth. And as you're saying, is often a rebirth for the woman. Because our culture doesn't really know how to support new mothers, I feel like the opportunity for a really potentially beautiful transformation is sometimes lost. And that's why we have staggering amounts of postpartum depression and marital problems post-baby. So the first thing I want to say is that there's just great potential for healing and beautiful transformation in a woman when she becomes a mother.
Okay.
And this is talked about in ancient traditions. In Chinese medicine, birth is known as a period where a mother could potentially heal lifelong illness and actually emerge out of birth even more vital and more powerful. Mm-hmm. So that's the potential. And I think where we lose that potential is, first of all, expecting them to go back to what they were before. Like, go get your pre-baby body back. Not allowing for that transformation actually stifles it.
Yeah. So what you're saying is like, there's this unconscious expectation that after the 9 months are up, I'm going to get the woman back that was before she was pregnant. And what you're saying is like, no. This is a time of major transformation. We have no idea how this thing is going to turn out, but you need to be aware of it and actually embrace that, because it could become one of the most beautiful transformations.
Exactly. And ways to support new mothers, kind of similar to sex. It's like space and time. Take care of the body. If a woman can really rest, especially in the first 40 days after pregnancy, like not do a lot, not lift a lot, tend to her body, from what I've seen, that is medicine for the woman.
Mm-hmm. One of our core beliefs about what a man amongst men is. A man amongst men creates environments where he and others can thrive. In this instance, with let's say a new child and also a wife that you care about, obviously, is in those 40 days, you would want to create an environment where all of you can thrive. And in order for that to happen, you need to be aware of what's necessary for the restoration process. One of the things I know that men, and maybe this is the last thing we'll hit on in this topic before we move on to pleasure, is men often say, I've lost my intimacy, my intimate connection with my partner because maybe she's consumed with the needs of the child, also chemically speaking, hormonally speaking. She could be getting a lot of her needs for intimacy met through her bond with her child. That's also covered in the female brain. And the guy's just like standing over here and being like, I still want love. I still want physical touch. How can a man communicate that in a way where he's speaking his truth, like he's being honest without layering on heavy-handed expectation and making her feel pressure, but also standing up for himself at the same time too?
Okay, I'm going to backtrack just a little bit, because similar to the conversation around sex, when we talk about these needs of the mother, it doesn't rest solely on the shoulders of the partner. These are really community-based needs, like having family around. Ideally wouldn't just be the man being like, okay, now these 40 days, I just have to give myself to this whole process. So ideally it's like community support, not just partner support that's going to help a woman through the transformation process. And then I really, really hear what you're saying here about men just feeling like, where's my place in this? When intimacy is lost, when the mother is consumed with the baby, etc. A really beautiful image that I heard once, and it was related to the nervous system. It was like how our nervous systems regulate in the presence of someone else. So a mother is going to regulate the nervous system of the baby, right? That's what all of this time spent together does, is she's regulating that baby. So where is the room for the father, for the man? And the image is the man behind the woman embracing and holding the woman holding and embracing the child.
Yeah. Yeah.
So then there's this like protective quality. The man is actually, in a sense, mothering the mother or showing up for the mother in a beautiful way. And I think just that presence, because birth, from what I understand, and I'm not a mom, so I can't speak from firsthand experience, but it's like one of the most difficult transitions in a woman's life. And so I think if there's that willingness, again, to just like be that steady presence behind her, that's going to relax her nervous system as she's like freaking the fuck out, trying to figure out who she is and how she's going to manage this child and go on without sleep, etc. So that feels like a powerful image of like tending to her to literally soothe and calm her. And in that place, a woman's going to be more receptive to have a conversation. Hey, I don't feel like my needs are being met right now. And this is what I genuinely need. To maybe sum it up, I think being really clear on what the needs are. This is what I need. I need to make love. I need to have physical touch. And standing in that is powerful. And then also approaching it from a sense of like, I got you. I'm not accusing you. I'm not blaming you. I got you. I'm supporting you. I'm soothing you. And I need you to hear what I need.
The energy is not whiny. It's not resenty. It's like, I love you. I'm the guy behind you. I'm holding this. And also like, here's what causes my engine to run. And here's a few things that I'm just really, really wanting as a desire to connect with you. And I want to share that with you and just like start that dialogue. Yeah. And then that goes back to where you began the conversation around like, that's your opportunity to listen, because what may come back is I'm exhausted and my body is changing. I don't feel pretty. I don't like whatever, who knows like what's going to come from that, but just being able to welcome whatever comes back, because understanding if you can meet that, then you'll eventually, if both of you have the best interest of the relationship in mind, we'll eventually be able to come to some common ground versus just saying like, this is what I need. How are you going to give it to me? Oftentimes the men come to our group and say that I'm frustrated because I told her what I needed and she's not willing. Well, it's like, well, yeah, when you give her a demand like that, it's probably the reason why she's pushing back.
Right.
How about we close out on this conversation around pleasure? I would love to know, what are some of the practices that you recommend to the women in your community to step into, to connect with, like to pleasure, to know what are the entry points for pleasure, to relax any kind of narrative or negativity they may have, or like shame or guilt around pleasure? Because in the work that I've been doing over the last number of months as part of John Weinland and Kendra Kunov's 8-month salon, they call it, around like fearless intimacy, when they ask women to embody pleasure, and like the women who have really practiced this and can get into their body and like just let it express through them, it is irresistible. Like it is show stopping. And even women that I wouldn't naturally find myself physically attracted to, I'm captivated. It's like an energetic flooding of my system. So it's so powerful. The reason why I want to ask the question about how you teach this to women is men who are listening pick up on this and either use some of these practices, introduce their partners to these practices, or at least point them your way so that like more women can tap into their pleasure centers.
I love hearing you talk about that, because it really is true that a woman in her pleasure, in her eros, it's captivating.
Yeah.
It's captivating. I actually learned this the first time. I started to belly dance and started to watch performers. And it was kind of this scenario where, like, not conventionally attractive women who had, not the perfect body and not the perfect look. It was just like, I can't take my eyes off of her.
Yes. Yeah.
And I feel what she feels.
Okay. Yeah. That's the thing right there, is the transmission of the feeling. Yeah. I feel electrified because I think I have a sense of her pleasure as she's in it. And it doesn't seem like men can transmit. I don't think we have the same ability to transmit that level of pleasure into another human being's body. And I know that you posted videos of yourself like belly dancing, and it's like alluring, it's captivating, it's hypnotic, it's mesmerizing. Belly dancing was one spot for you.
I can't recommend embodiment practice enough. By embodiment practice, I just mean something that's going to anchor you in your body and that really brings you joy. So a lot of women will be like, well, but I go to power yoga 3 times a week. And like, I love to sweat. And I'm like, do you actually feel good when you leave? Do you feel good because you had a workout? Or do you actually feel like, oh God, my body feels open and relaxed and amazing? So finding that kind of practice, if it's yoga, if it's dance, personally with my own clients, dance is a cornerstone. Just movement is a cornerstone of anchoring those sensations and processing emotion also, because dance and movement has this beautiful way of letting us process things that we don't have time to during the day, like the record skip, right? Yeah. Where we had a process that was just undigested, and the record skipping and movement helps us to flush that out. So movement and embodiment practice is a cornerstone.
It sounds like movement and embodiment that has a direct intention to connecting with the pleasure center. Most women that I know, most men I know, go to yoga, don't talk about connecting to their pleasure center. It's maybe about mindful movement. Yeah. It's maybe about stress reduction. This actual intention of, I want to connect to my body in a way that activates my pleasure centers. I don't even know how that happens. I think that is probably the first place, is needing to even just start from that place of curiosity. Is like, what does activate my pleasure centers? Maybe beyond just physically touching myself in my erogenous zones.
Exactly. Like expanding the definition of what pleasure is really important for me, in fact, because a lot of us just associate pleasure with purely sexual pleasure. Yeah. And there is this erotic eros energy in pleasure, but I can experience that when I like drink my favorite cup of tea, or I can experience that when I'm just deeply feeling and appreciating and sensing something. It's an expanded version of pleasure. And I think if there's one thing for people to take away from today, it's that opening up that channel, bringing in more pleasure is it's enjoyable, but it's also a life raft for your entire system, right? Your nervous system, your energy body, your physical body, your health, your sex life. More pleasure, please.
Yeah, damn right. Because if women are experiencing more pleasure and then we're feeling that and seeing it, like, the world becomes a better place. Blaire, this has been awesome. If someone who's listening, a woman wants to follow you or wants to become part of one of your programs, or there's a man who's listening who knows a woman that needs to check you out, what do you got going on right now? Where would you direct them?
Come hang out with me on Instagram. I love posting there. I love writing. I love interacting with my community there. So come hang out with me there, and that'll give you a good sense and taste of what I do. I just began a program, a new one. Registration ends on Monday night, and it's called The Fierce Feminine. And this is for women who are wanting to re-examine power in a feminine sense. So who want to feel more bold and courageous and even more pleasure and do more, but from a deeply feminine place.
Awesome. Your Instagram handle is?
Blaire with an E, Blaire, Lindsay, Lindsay.
I'm putting that in the show notes. And also you have an ebook, and that's entitled
Essential Orgasm.
Yeah, I read that when it came out. It's awesome. And they can get that on your website?
Yep, website. It's a little bit technical, but it's a good read. It's short and gives you some insight into how to expand pleasure in the bedroom.
Yeah, beautiful. So a lot of great resources from Blaire. Blaire, thank you. This has been great.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dom. It's been really fun.
Hey, thanks for listening to the Man Amongst Men podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. And if you want more access to tools and resources, and you want information on our upcoming live events and retreats, head on over to www.doinnerwork.com.